Dialed In Angling podcast presented by Onyx Fish, Fish USA, Ski-Doo, Runnings, Minnesota DNR, Strike Master, 13 Fishing, L&M Fleet Supply, and DeWalt. Well, welcome back to this week's podcast. I got a ton to talk about. I'm fresh off the Northwest Sports Show. What's cool about being down at the sports show, you get to touch, feel a lot of different new products that are out there. I get that same feeling from when I go down to ICAST, when they launch all the new baits. There's just something to be said about being at a sports show. I know sports shows are sort of the thing of the past, and, they're not gaining momentum anymore. The ones that are out there, I think, are still really good, especially ones like the Northwest Sports Show, the St. Paul Ice Show, ICAST. When you can touch and feel something for the first time, we obviously live in an age where, you can go on the internet, you can watch YouTube videos, you can get a really good idea about what sort of products are out there, how to use them. There's all sorts of useful information on the internet. But for me, nothing replaces actually touching it, feeling it, looking at it for the first time. So I want to discuss a few things that are coming out as far as technology as it pertains to forward-facing sonar. The Active Target 2 XL comes to mind. Also, Garmin dropping their 360, their spy pole. I want to talk a little bit about both those technologies. In this podcast as well, I want to talk about some ice fishing. We got the Bassmaster Classic coming up. I want to talk about the new Mille Lacs regulations, kind of all of that stuff sort of dropped this week. And I want to dive into all these topics. But let's start with the forward-facing sonar topic because, it's only going to get better and better. I've said for a long time that forward-facing sonar, live sonar is here to stay. With as much controversies that's surrounding forward-facing sonar, live sonar, whether people love it, hate it, it's here to stay. I look at it a lot like you look at mapping technology or you look at just sonar in general, how much it's come around, in the last 10 to 20 years, and it only continues to improve. It doesn't, reverse, right? Once the genie's out of the bottle, you just continue to get better and better and better. And you're going to see this with forward-facing sonar. You're already starting to see it. You're starting to see it with Active Target 2 XL. You're starting to see it with Garmin 360, the spy pole. I'm sure Humminbird has the same thing with live imaging. It's just going to continue to get better. I look back at mapping technology, right? When mapping first came out, I was guiding, and, it really helped me as a young guide to be able to go to different bodies of water and have a map chip and to see those contours and to kind of get honed in on those areas. I think it, for me as a guide, it expanded where I could guide, the learning curve, which was much shorter on a lot of these lakes. And it is for a lot of other anglers as well. But I just remember, some of the older guides that were out there, and they were just like completely disappointed because of mapping technology, because, they had spent their whole life looking for these secret spots and these areas that maybe only they knew existed, little inside turns, what have you. And then, boom, here comes mapping technology and 1 foot contours. I mean, it just gets better and better and better to the point where, these old guides or older guides at the time, that their sort of secrets and stuff are just completely gone. And so they looked at mapping technology as this should be illegal. We should get rid of it, disband it. Here we are today. You look at mapping, mapping is only getting better. We're seeing 1 foot contour. We're seeing LiDAR images. We're seeing overlays and different layers to the maps where you can see hard bottom spots and that's going to continue to get better. Sonar is no different. Forward-facing sonar is here to stay, whether people say it's going to get banned, whether they hate it, love it. I absolutely love it. I love technology. Moving forward with technology, I've always said forward-facing sonar, the next phase is going to be that 360 view, or something where I'm not just scanning back and forth like a crazy man, or having to change my transducers back and forth between like perspective or scout mode and then back rate to forward-facing sonar, that it's going to kind of get integrated, right? I mean, I think we're going to move to the point where you put the deucer down and you'll be able to see all the way around you live at all times. We're starting to get there. You're seeing that with Active Target 2 XL deucer, and you're seeing that with Garmin 360. Now, you have to sort of read between the fine print. Both of them are advertising, sort of a 360 view. Active Target 2 XL, you've got to have 2 deucers down in scout mode, and then essentially, they're saying you're seeing 360, which is true, but you have to have 2 deucers, 2 boxes, on one unit. So if you're putting it on a trolling motor, if you're putting it on pole, either way, I'm excited to see the Active Target 2. I've always said that, I know Garmin captures all the headlines, but for me, I have Garmin units, I have Lowrance units, and, I think both of them obviously compete. I would say last year, just comparing like a Garmin 34 unit to an Active Target 2, they were pretty close. I could see my jig out at 60, 70 feet. I could see fish in the weeds. I would say they were very, very comparable as far as definition and whatnot. I will say when I started fishing a little bit deeper, especially when I was down viewing for like lake trout, I could actually see a little bit further on the Active Target 2 than I could my Garmin 34 that was on the ice bundle. And, it could have been the battery power. Obviously the power is a little cleaner coming out of my Active Target 2 versus one of my ice bundles. I'm changing that. I have a ice bundle this year that I've got rigged up on a Sport Track system that'll be in my Lund, and it'll have lithium power. It'll have Norsk batteries. I'm running all Norsks in the boat, but I'm also running Norsk batteries for my ice bundles as well. And so it'll be interesting to compare these two. Active Target 2 XL, Lowrance is coming out saying that they've improved their sonar technology as well, or their definition when it comes to forward-facing sonar. So it'll be interesting to see that for myself. So being down at the Northwest Sports Show, seeing these things, talking to different reps, seeing the demos, seeing the units, seeing the transducers, it can't help. I can't help but get excited for open water fishing. Just being in a Lund boat all weekend and being around boats all weekend gets me fired up for open water. I've done a ton of ice fishing. I'm still ice fishing. I was out ice fishing today. I was with my Uncle Gary on a small lake. We were catching crappies. I'll get more into ice fishing in a little bit, but it was really nice being around boats, being around some of these technologies. Now, as far as the Garmin 360 with the spy pole, I didn't see that unit down there at the Northwest Sports Show. It just kind of got unveiled within the last day. I kind of like the spy pole. What's cool about the spy pole, there's different settings. One of the settings in that spy pole is spy lock. So if you actually touch the screen on a target, so whether it's fish or structure, it will lock on that structure. And so, or that fish or that school of fish. That way, if you've got your trolling motor out, because it's on the pole, you click on it and it'll automatically lock on that target for you. They're calling it spy lock, but basically you're locking in on a target, whether it's fish or whether it's structure. That's a really cool thing. For me, there's so many times where as a captain, it's windy. I've got the pole down in the back. I've got active target on the front trolling motor. I'm trying to lock on a particular school of fish or one fish, or It could be structure itself, but to be able to lock on that thing and just follow it around or get to where you need to go is pretty neat. With the spy pole, there's different settings on there. I was watching the videos a little bit. Garmin 360 is similar to the Lowrance, where, you've got to have two different deucers pointing, kind of at 180, and then you're picking up sort of that 360 viewing. Like I was saying earlier, it's going to get to that point where it's going to be live 360 no matter what. Again, it's not quite there yet, but you're going to get to the point where you're not going to need multiple deucers, multiple black boxes to get that 360 view. This is I would say, the stepping stone to that next point. And so my point being, forward-facing sonar, I believe, is here to stay, and it's only going to improve. Clarity is going to get better. The definition is already getting better. Garmin and the Lowrance are both talking about better defined units. Just being able to see the baits farther, being able to identify species of fish. It's just going to get better and better and better as we move forward. I mean, look at the difference between what we have now versus a Panoptix that came out 5 years ago. Night and day difference. Night and day difference from Lowrance's Active Target 1 that first came out, that first unit. Light years ahead of it already with Active Target 2 XL. So, that technology is going to continue to improve. You're seeing it across the board, whether you're a walleye angler, a bass angler, muskie anglers, crappie anglers, they're all utilizing this technology, including, guides like myself. And so, it's here to stay, and it's going to get better and better. So whether you love it or hate it, that's sort of the reality and the realm that we live in right now. So speaking of that, the Bassmaster Classic is coming up this weekend. There's going to be a lot showcase there as far as videos that come out, whether it's different companies promoting their new product that are coming out. I know a lot of new product is launched at ICAST down in Florida, but there's a lot of new product that's unveiled at Bassmaster as well. And so that's later this week. And so along those realms, you're going to see, everyone that's fishing the Classic using some sort of state-of-the-art forward-facing sonar unit, live sonar unit. They're using perspective mode. They're using scout mode. They're also using forward-facing sonar, just in multiple realms. They have limited, the amount of units that you can have on your boat for certain tournaments. Whether that continues to be the trend or not, we'll see. But, the Classic is always sort of that time of year, whether you're a hardcore bass angler or not. It's just sort of the kickoff to, a giant tournament that I follow. I wouldn't consider myself a huge bass head, but I do tune into the Classic. At least I check out the leaderboard. I check out the videos that drop as a result of the Bassmaster Classic. So you're going to want to check that out this weekend. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I do want to dive into more ice fishing topics, kind of the state of the state we're at as far as ice fishing opportunities that are still out there. I've been out this week. I was out last week. Like I said, it's sort of different from going from ice to sitting at a sports show all weekend, talking boats and open water, looking at all this technology, and then boom, just jumping right back into ice fishing. I was filming some different things this week. I was also just on the ice checking spots. Like I said, fished with my Uncle Gary, so I want to recap some of that stuff. I also want to talk about the different opportunities that are still out there that are, big time ice destinations that really that type of fishing is only heating up, whether it's shallow water panfish, Lake of the Woods, Lake Winnipeg, Devil's Lake perch. We're going to talk all about this when we get back from this break.
There is nothing quite like Minnesota winter. Whether you want to try ice fishing, ice skating, or ice boating, make sure you know the risks and how to play safe on the ice. Measure ice thickness frequently and never go out alone. Always wear a life jacket or float coat and have ice picks readily accessible in case you fall through. Playing on the ice can be fun, but it's never 100% safe. Learn how you could play safe before you go out. Safety is always in season. A message from the Minnesota DNR.
OnX Fish is the best tool I have ever used for finding new lakes to target. Quickly filter lakes by species, then select trophy potential, high abundance, keeper potential, or high stocking effort to find the fish you are after in the size and the numbers you are trying to catch. Download from the App Store today to get research tools for the serious anglers and beginners alike, giving you the data to target the right lakes and the confidence to get there. Use tools like recent imagery, fishing hotspot data, or the best-in-class weather features that call out current wind, weather, barometer, moon phase, majors and minors, along with precip and more. OnX Fish is a phenomenal tool both on and off the water for discovering new fishing opportunities, many of which you'd never known existed. Download OnX Fish Midwest today, the app that is changing the game on ice and open water.
Runnings Home, Farm, and Outdoor stores are celebrating 78 years, serving 90 local communities across the Upper Midwest, the Northeast, and America's Heartland. Runnings has everything you and your family need for your home, on the farm, and in the outdoors. Lawn and garden, hardware, farm and ranch supplies, sporting goods, housewares, snacks, and everything for your pets. Go to runnings.com to find one of the 90 locations near you, or shop online anytime at runnings.com. Runnings, your home, farm, and outdoor store.
Okay, let's dive into everything ice. This warm up here has me thinking spring. Obviously, the Northwest Sports Show has me thinking spring. I definitely have spring fever. However, I do kind of like this tweener season that we're getting into. And what I mean by tweener is, there's still ice fishing to be had, obviously safely, but you've got, rivers starting to open up. They had the Freeze Your Butt Off tournament down in Red Wing this last weekend. And so opportunities are opening up, in the boat. Plus you can still go ice fishing. You just have to kind of do it safely and figure out where you're going to go. I know I talked to a few different guides like Marcus Quam down in South Dakota. He's hanging it up. He said the landings are getting pretty bad down there in South Dakota. I also talked to Miles down in southern Minnesota, who's contributed to the Dialed In Angling podcast as far as some fishing reports. He was talking about getting in the boat. So this tweener season is upon us where there are boating opportunities out there, but there still are some really quality ice fishing. So let's just start with northern Minnesota, where I'm at right now, kind of the state of the state, what I'm seeing as far as ice conditions. I would say from, pretty much like Brainerd north, everything is in pretty darn good shape. Obviously, with this new fresh snow that we just got, you got to be careful of some of these problematic areas like landings, for example. Any of those north-facing landings or hillsides where, trucks and sand and salt have kind of pounded away at that. And then you have some of this spring runoff going into some of those landing areas. Just use caution when getting access to the lake. I'm pretty much done driving in my area. Around Brainerd, I've been as far north as Cass Lake and Winnie. Even there, there were some people still driving. I took my four-wheelers just because I felt more comfortable that I could rip around anywhere I wanted to go. Not just the landing, but some of the heaves and stuff that have melted, and obviously all the snow that melted off the lake, kind of funneled through some of those cracks and heaves. So I just felt way more comfortable bringing my four-wheeler than I did driving. And I highly recommend if you're coming up to northern Minnesota this weekend, if you have plans of fishing somewhere, make sure you're calling ahead to find out if they're allowing ATV traffic, walking, snowmobiles. Looks like we've got some more snow in the mix here. So, I'm going to be bouncing back in between using my four-wheeler and my snowmobile. But fishing has been fantastic, with the snow melting off the ice. Last week, my son and I kind of poked around a bunch of different lakes. I had some filming obligations that I needed to get done, some product stuff that we were doing. And so I wanted to be on a couple different bites. And I know when we get into this time period, you start to see these deeper basin fish transition shallow. You also get fish that are rising up in the water column because you're getting a lot of oxygen pouring in through that. It's amazing how quickly the lakes drain. Last week, like I said, with all that snow melting, with that warm up, that 50 degrees and that wind, the lakes were an absolute swamp, right? We were out there. There was water everywhere. You had the kind of that toilet bowl action going. Anytime you drilled a hole, the very next day I went out and hit these same lakes in these same areas, and that water had all drained. And so that just gives you an idea of how quickly these oxygen levels are starting to rise. And so we were seeing panfish, we were chasing crappies, we were chasing bluegills. They were rising up in the water column, leaving a lot of these deeper basins. They were also a lot more spooky than they were, let's say, a couple weeks ago. And also we were setting up and finding a lot more fish along vegetation, whether it's, a cabbage bed. We even found fish up along bulrushes and rice, which was amazing to me that they were just quickly up and moving. Because, the lakes that my son and I were on, we had found quite a few fish in the basin, let's say last Monday. You fast forward to last Wednesday, Thursday, before I left for the Northwest Sports Show. And man, those fish had already picked up and moved, and they were gone. They were on the move. They were also a lot more spooky, but they were also biting a lot better. Even though those fish were spooky, if we could get in front of them, they were biting. They'd come in and just smash the baits. They were hitting anything. Even bluegills were smashing spoons. You had crappies, just inhaling whatever came by them. It wasn't these, staring contest fish that we're used to, in February. March is on. And the reason I love March fishing is because of that. I really like shallow water fishing, first of all. Anytime I get opportunities to do some sight fishing, fish with my underwater camera, or just get up shallow, even on a lake where maybe you can't see that well, but to get up shallow with my live sonar and watch these fish come in and strike, I absolutely love it. And so when I talk about the best time of year is yet to come, we're just approaching that point. Now, I will say, with the snow that we've had and this little bit of cool down, and it looks like we're going to get a little more snow this weekend, although southern Minnesota, South Dakota, Iowa, looks like a lot of that snow is going to stay a little bit further south. Northern Minnesota looks like it's going to get spared a little bit. But I will say even today when I was out with my Uncle Gary, the lake we were on, just that little bit of snowpack, it wasn't much. It was only a couple inches of snow, but it was on the ice. Sort of, I guess, either dampen the sound or whatever, but I was able to get on top of those fish a little bit better than I was when that snow melted. And I'm seeing this with forward-facing sonar, going back to our original conversation in the last segment about forward-facing sonar. I'm using that to locate these fish, to get in front of some of these fish, but also knowing that these fish are stacking up along the edges of these weed beds or rice beds or whatever. There's times where I saw the fish and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go up there and drill and even come back tomorrow to this lake and slide in here and see if I can get on a good sight fishing bite. I love sight fishing this time of year using just a flip over. I like using a single man flip over if I can. The hideout from Otter is my kind of sight fishing shelter of choice, just because I can flip it over quickly if I need to move. It's got a narrower sled on it, so I'm not dragging this great big sled around with me if I want to walk out from locations. It's really my early ice, flip over, but it's really truly my sight fishing flip over. That floor plan of that hideout where it kicks out in front of you quite a ways, you can drill a hole and you can see straight over the top of it. And yeah, it's hard to believe that we're in early March, but yeah, we're already talking about sight fishing. I mean, that 50-degree weather sure changed things dramatically. I mean, if you looked at or listened to our fishing reports a week ago, guys were still out. Marcus Quam, I mean, he was out in the Snow Bear. We had Miles in southern Minnesota, my cousin Trig in Brainerd. You had Randon Olson out in Ottertail. Everybody was all systems go. I mean, Randon and Trig both had fish houses out last week. That's not the case anymore. Those houses are gone. Even in northern Minnesota, where you can have your fish house out till next Monday, north of Highway 200. I was up around Cass and Winnie and those areas. I didn't get as far north, obviously, as Red Lake or Lake of the Woods, but where I was at on Cass and Winnie and Leech, nobody had houses out. Matter of fact, there was a lot of resorts kind of closing their landings to vehicle traffic. And so we just escalated that quickly. And so getting into my sight fishing and shallow water bite, I love whipping over that hideout and getting into these shallow water situations. Nothing better than watching fish strike right underneath your hole. I think it's extremely cool. Ever since I've been a kid, I've been just infatuated with underwater cameras, but also sight fishing. I can think back to times where I was sight fishing, like in a spear shack, for example. Back in the day, I've gone out with friends spearing. I'm not a big spearer. I don't really care to throw a spear. I'm not judging anybody that does. I have really good friends that love spearing pike in the winter. So, great, good for you. If you like doing that, great. I'm nothing against it. But I always liked fishing out of a spear shack much better than I liked spearing in a spear shack, if that makes sense. Especially like I'd always talk to my buddies if they were pike fishing, and I'd always ask them, "Hey, do you see any crappies or bluegills in there in the weed beds they were in, whether they were in a cabbage bed or whatever?" And if they said they were, man, I was in the shallows and I was looking down my hole. I absolutely love doing it. This sight fishing bite is such a narrow window that we get in March and early April. And it happens so fast, much like we're seeing now where, it warms up, the landings start going on us quickly. And so you're not really able to get out to some of your sight fishing areas. I can think of areas too where I'd sight fish along reed beds or rice beds. Let's say it's deep water around, like a prime area for this would be like a deep water basin that comes up into this, really quick break line that comes up into like reeds or rice. And those fish will come up in there. There's bugs, there's invertebrates, there's heat that comes off that vegetation that those fish absolutely love. And they'll come up cruising right underneath the ice. And so, like I said, a lot of times I'll go out around those areas. I'll try to find those fish with forward-facing sonar, and then I drill holes. And a lot of times you kind of have to just be patient and wait for them to come back, because all of that noise is going to spook them. They'll leave, but then, you'll see those fish return and they'll move into those areas. And so you have to be a little bit more patient. But when you're staring down a hole, those fish are active, aggressive. They're not like they were a month ago where they take forever to get to your hole. A lot of these fish are flying around underneath the ice. And so getting set up into those areas, into these areas, that sight fishing window is so short. And, really the last few springs, we've had such an early ice out spring that sight fishing window is so narrow that I just love it when it comes around this time of year. So I have to do it. I'm definitely trying to get in as many sight fishing bites as possible. But that's just one of the opportunities that's sitting out there. Obviously, Minnesota, with the walleye season being closed, that's when I get into perch fishing, bluegills, crappie sight fishing bites. But there's other ice fishing opportunities that I love this time of year. Lake of the Woods is one of them. Getting up to Lake of the Woods and still getting out on the ice. I've always had this sort of, romantic fantasy of being able to fish in my boat on the Rainy River, but then also, having my four-wheeler up there with my ice fishing stuff so I could ice fish one day and then be in the boat the next. I've never been able to achieve it like that, with that liquidity, if you will. I have friends that, one guy drove the four-wheelers up there and the augers and all their ice fishing equipment. The other guy drove the boat. And so they ice fish for a couple days and then they fished in the boat for a couple days. I've never been able to achieve that, but I definitely want to. I've done it where I ice fished, I drove home, got my boat, and then I was back on the Rainy River within a day or two. But I've never had it. We're on the same trip. We ice fished and then open water fish. But Lake of the Woods is just one of those destinations right now that the fishing gets better and better and better as those fish start to stage towards the Rainy River. You got to do it. So if you want to get in some last minute ice fishing opportunities that, is fairly close to home, Lake of the Woods, it's just so much fun this time of year. It's just hard to describe to people, especially when you're sitting out there. It's 30, 40, 50 degrees at times, and you're catching walleyes like crazy. Another one that's always on my radar and one that I love doing late ice, that's Devil's Lake. Devil's Lake itself, there's some other sloughs around Devil's Lake where you get on those great big jumbo perch. I don't know if you guys saw, like a couple of weeks ago, there was a 3-pound perch out in Devil's Lake. My buddy Alex Reslock, he's a contributor to Dialed In Angling, sent the pictures. I saw him on Facebook for myself. And like Alex says, the pictures don't do it justice. A 3-pound perch. As you get into this time of year, the fishing gets better on Devil's Lake. Those perch get more aggressive. They're more active. They're moving. It's not the doldrums of February. And even though the perch numbers are down in Devil's Lake, when you have big fish potential like that, to get perch into that, even 1.5 pounds, 1.75 pounds, 2 pound, 2.5 pound, 3 pound range, that would get me driving out to Devil's Lake. I would head down Highway 2 and get out to Devil's Lake because it's just one of those destinations that in March, it's absolutely electric. Not to mention the walleyes turn on again. I've been out there in March. I've been out there in early April and had some of the best ice fishing I've ever had in my life, just because of that fact that we went out, we caught a bunch of walleyes, and then we went perch fishing, absolutely smashed the perch. Super, super fun. And it's just one of those March bites that you can do pretty quickly. You can rip out to Devil's Lake, fish for a couple days, be back home in no time. The last one I want to talk about, and these are ones that are on my radar and that I think about all the time, that are really attainable, that I do all the time. Not to say that there's not others out there, right? I mean, obviously there's a ton of ice fishing within this time frame, and there's destinations that I'm leaving out. But this last destination that I want to talk about is one that's special to me and has been since about 2010, 11, somewhere in there. And that would be Lake Winnipeg. I absolutely love fishing Lake Winnipeg in mid to late March. Yes, I've had some horrific trips up there where we had 50-mile-an-hour winds and blizzards, but I've had other trips up there where we caught 400 walleyes in a trip and it was 50 degrees. Heck, I had a trip up there one time with my buddy Phil where, it started out super cold. We were driving snowmobiles. By the end of the trip, there was tons of water on the ice. It was 70 degrees and we were whacking greenbacks with rip and wrap. I mean, it's just, you have that entire spectrum of weather up there in March. However, the fishing gets really good. I mean, these fish slide down that entire lake and they start to stage up in front of that south basin. And it is absolutely incredible. It's like a light switch where those greenbacks turn on. And once again, even if you don't have the numbers up at Lake Winnipeg, you're definitely have a shot at getting a giant walleye, that fish of a lifetime can occur in March. And, I will say I've heard from a lot of my guide friends up there and a lot of people that have been up there that the bite's been a little bit slower this year. And obviously the amount of snow that they have, the traffic's been way down. But as we get towards the end of March, those fish are going to get fired up. And so the fact that the bite's been a little bit off and the amount of snow that's on the lake, that has kept the traffic down. I mean, that's sort of the makings of the perfect storm to have just a killer, March greenback bite up there. I would definitely say if you're heading up to Lake Winnipeg, not only have the rip and wraps and your rattle baits, but don't be afraid to try some soft plastics. I know one of my absolute go-tos up there is using like Crush City plastics now, bringing a freeloader on like an 1/8 ounce moon eye jig, just hooking it horizontal. Also a mooch minnow on an 1/8 ounce jig. I like using a little bit lighter jig heads with a little bit bigger plastic. And what's cool about the Crush City plastics is you get that buoyancy factor. And so the fish up there love something with a slow fall. That's why flutter spoons work great up there. Even rip and wraps where you snap them, but then let them slowly fall in the water column. They like that fluttering action. The buoyancy of the Crush City plastics give just that lift on that bait. You use it with a lighter jig head. You can use a neon moon eye jig is one of my favorite. A sleek jig is another one that I like using in an 1/8 ounce. If the fish get really finicky, I go to using like a moon eye jig or a sleek jig, but then I'll rig a salted shiner on there, just hooked horizontal, and just have it sitting there as my dead stick. I try to call them in with my rattle baits, whether I'm using a number 6 rip and wrap is sort of my size of choice. I like calling them in with the rattle baits. If they won't hit the rattle baits, then I like trying that dead stick method where I'm hooking the salted shiner horizontal on just like an 1/8 ounce jig and just letting it sit there. Another thing that I like doing for it sounds funny, but it's like the 1-2 combo is calling them in with the rattle bait, but then hitting them on that plastic. You'll know if they're on the plastics, and they absolutely love soft plastics up there. Try rigging that horizontal, a VMC neon moon eye jig with either a mooch minnow or a freeloader in anything like gizzard shad. You can use smelt, any of that color spectrum with the greens in there. I guarantee you're going to put fish topside. So let's take one more pause. When I come back, I'm going to wrap this episode up with some different news as far as Mille Lacs fishing regulations. I want to talk about just a few other reports that I'm getting coming in as far as ice conditions. Also, some things to watch out for if you are venturing out on the ice. Just like I said, you got to use caution just like you do early ice. I know I've preached that in the past, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but truly, if you are safe this time of year, you can have some of the best ice fishing is yet to come. So stay tuned. We got more Dialed In Angling after this. The cold months are rolling in, but that doesn't mean the adventure slows down. There's only one way to make the most of winter with the 2026 Ski-Doo lineup. Whether you're heading deep into your favorite fishing spots or carving your own path off the grid, Ski-Doo is built to take you there. And there's a reason Ski-Doo has been the best-selling snowmobile brand for more than 2 decades. Proven, reliable, world-class performance. Winter moves fast. If you want it, get it.
It's that time of year again, anglers. Winter is here, and L&M Fleet Supply is ready to make this your best season ever. Head into your favorite L&M Fleet Supply location across northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, or Michigan's UP, and browse the extensive collection of DeWalt tools and accessories, all guaranteed tough. Cut through the thickest ice with DeWalt's 20-volt drill. Brighten your setup with the assortment of 20-volt portable LED lights. And stay entertained with the DeWalt Bluetooth 20-volt speaker. It's weather-resistant, rugged, and ready for any adventure. Check out DeWalt's guaranteed tough deals and more at L&M Fleet Supply. Together, they're the perfect match for all your ice fishing needs.
Hey, Dialed In Angling fans. If you're looking for the greatest selection of ice fishing gear online, you're going to want to check out fishusa.com. They're America's tackle shop. They've got all the premier fishing brands under one roof. Check them out at fishusa.com. Okay, for our final segment of this week's podcast, we won't have any fishing reports this week. A lot of the guides are shutting down. I want to personally thank all of our contributors to Dialed In Angling all season long. These guys are super busy. They're excellent anglers. They're a great source of information all season long. As we get towards the end of end of March here, a lot of them have pulled their houses. They're not running trips anymore. And so I didn't want to pester them with, any sort of fishing report into March. As we get towards April, though, and we start getting information from the Rainy River out on Green Bay, I'm going to have fishing reports starting to pour in here in not too distant future. So, but for this week, just again, hats off to the guys that gave fishing reports. Hopefully it gave you some insight into what's going on out there. I know Marcus Quam does a great job out in South Dakota. Alex Reslock up in Devil's Lake, North Dakota. We got Miles down in southern Minnesota. Trig Roach from TR Guide Service in Brainerd giving us great reports all winter. Joff Bullivant from Leech Lake. We had Remington Moran from Elite Angling Adventures. Brian Beef Sather up at Lake of the Woods, pouring in with reports all season long. Thanks again to all the reports coming out of the Metro as well. Hats off to these guys. They do it out of the kindness of their heart just to give you information on what's going on in their neck of the woods. And I truly, truly appreciate it. So stay tuned. We will have more fishing reports as we're moving forward into late March and, of course, into April. I can't wait to start getting some of these open water reports pouring in. But let's talk a little bit about the Mille Lacs regulations. I know a few weeks ago I was at the MilFac meeting, and I will say the DNR stayed true to form that they said that they were going to get the summer regs out before the Northwest Sports Show, and they actually did that. And they stayed on task, and they kept it a 3 fish limit, which is great. I think the lake is moving in the right direction. I think it can handle a 3 fish limit at this point. It's 3 fish, 17 to 20, 1/20. And so same regulation that we saw this winter. We saw it late summer last year. I will say, based on the winter bite that I saw and everything that's going on in Mille Lacs, I think it's going to be a really good spring fishing on Mille Lacs. I think that people are going to be able to harvest quite a few fish this year. I know for me, that 17 to 20, there's quite a few fish within that 17 to 20. Just me as a guide, I'm not keeping that many fish over 20. There are quite a few that are like maybe that 20 1/8, 20 1/4. But for the most part, what makes up the bulk of the fish that we were keeping this winter, and of course late last summer, a lot of those fish were 17 1/2, 18, 18 1/2, 19. Perfect eaters in my opinion. And so I'm pumped to see this regulation. It's again that step forward that I think Mille Lacs is taking. That step forward. If you were out there this winter, there was no denying that this next year class of walleyes are absolutely everywhere in Mille Lacs. So that's really good to see that recruitment of young of the year walleyes coming up. Man, they are absolutely everywhere in Mille Lacs. And so I hope that year class can thrive. I know we'd get another shot in the arm if we could have another really good perch hatch this year. I know just me as an angler and someone that cares about not just Mille Lacs, but all of our fisheries. If we could get a really good perch hatch this year, that would make my day. Even though it makes fishing a little tougher, I just want to see Mille Lacs continue to thrive and be, sort of that walleye factory that it's always been. And I think the lake can handle a 3 fish limit. I think the fishing's going to be a little bit better, especially in the spring, but I'm really hoping for some sort of big perch hatch, not just for the walleyes, but I want to see the perch fishing continue year after year after year. It's been really fun as a guide, someone that loves jumbo perch, to be able to go out and catch these giant Mille Lacs jumbos. I know they knocked the limit down to 5. Me personally, I think the lake could still handle a 10 fish limit, but I know why the DNR did it, right? We have an agreement with the bands. It's a shared fishery, and we got close or went over that allocation as far as what we're allowed to keep. And so I completely understand. However, just being an angler that absolutely loves catching jumbo perch, it's great to see not only the jumbos that are in the lake, but to see all of these 6 to 10 inch perch that I'm seeing as well, or 6 to 8 inch perch. The next generation of perch coming up, they're absolutely everywhere as well. So if we could get another good yellow perch hatch, I think we'd be on the right track to, just really having a good, well-rounded fishery. You couple that with the fact that there's a ton of Cisco's in the lake, so a ton of tulibies. You've got a ton of walleyes with good recruitment. We've got a ton of perch with a good year class of jumbos underneath them. And then also this winter, I saw a fair amount of burbot. There's a lot of pike in the lake. Obviously, the smallmouth bass population is doing really well. And of course, the muskie population starting to rebound. They're doing some stocking. I think Mille Lacs is just kind of on that trajectory of, just being that I guess cornerstone fishery that it's always been. And that's just what I want to see. And I want this for all of our fisheries, not just Mille Lacs. I don't want to see any fishery in Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota, South Dakota, Canada go through the growing pains that we've seen on Mille Lacs over the course of the last, decade. And a lot of that I know was spurred on by zebra mussels. Obviously regulations are different because it's a shared fisheries with the band. And so I get all that. But to see Mille Lacs to have this consistent regulation of the 3 walleye limit, can't wait. Can't wait for this summer to open up on Mille Lacs. I grew up fishing that lake. I know a lot of other passionate walleye anglers, tournament anglers, a lot of other anglers like myself got their start fishing Mille Lacs Lake. And, I want to see it succeed. And so to have these regulations moving forward, a 3 fish limit, I think it's going to be a great summer on the lake. Along those same lines, there's been a lot of talk. We've talked about it on this podcast about a 4 fish limit statewide. Going back to our original segment on forward-facing sonar, I really think the time is now to have a 4 fish limit, not 6. To see all of our fisheries continue to thrive and succeed, I want to see a reduction in walleye limit. And to be honest with you, I know we have a lot of special regulation panfish lakes, but I wouldn't mind going, even bluegills going from 20 to 10 or perch going from 20 to 15, if it's warranted, moving forward, if the, data starts to suggest that forward facing sonar is shaping or eliminating, certain species of fish or numbers of fish in any of our fisheries, I think we need to, visit potentially changing regulations. Now, if you're listening to this, don't jump all over the radio saying, Tony, what are you talking about? I don't want to see this. I don't want to see more regulation from the government or whatever your thoughts are. I'm not saying changing regs right now for all these other species, but I am advocating for changing regulations for walleyes now. 6 to 4. That regulation's been on the books since the 50s, 6 fish limit. I wouldn't mind seeing 4 fish limit moving forward. I know me as a person that loves eating fish and has a family of 4. When I bring 4 walleyes home, it's hard to eat 4 walleyes, even in the walleyes that I'm keeping under 20 inches. For the most part, I like harvesting fish from, let's say 15 to 20 inches. If you have 4 fish within that size range, that's a great meal of fish. And you know what? A lot of times when you have 4 fish like that for a family of 4 like ours, we can't even eat them all. And so for me, I just personally, I have the opinion that I think the time is now to kind of look and really sort of, collectively from the state, just everybody chime in and want to know what your thoughts are on a 4 fish limit, but I think the time is now. So, all right, let's wrap this thing up. This is it. Hopefully everybody gets an opportunity to get out, do some more ice fishing. If you do, use caution, spud bars, picks over the neck, float suits. If you're leaving from the landing, before you just take off on your 4-wheeler or snowmobile, check the ice. A lot of these spots, the landings seem to be the problematic area. When I'm getting out onto the lake, the ice is still very thick. It seems like that top layer of ice is very kind of chunky. I wouldn't say honeycombed, but sort of chunky. And then you get down to that hard ice and there's plenty of it still. So lots of opportunities to get out there, take advantage of some ice fishing while it lasts. So that's all I got for you this week. Good luck to everybody. As always, thanks for tuning in. This has been the Dialed In Angling Podcast.